Welcome to another lecture. Today, let us discuss the 2026 film Mother Mary. I am Alexei. In this context, we will proceed methodically, with definitions first and disputes later, as it were.
Hello, I am Priyanka. I will be asking the simple questions that, are usually not so simple once we open them up.
Let's begin with a structural overview. Mother Mary is a psychological drama written and directed by David Lowery. It fuses pop stardom's public theater with supernatural motifs to examine authorship, guilt, and the vicissitudes of creative partnership. The narrative is, to use the appropriate term, a two-hander. Anne Hathaway plays Mary, a world-famous pop star, and Michaela Cole plays Sam Anselm, her former costume designer, estranged lover, and crucial collaborator. Most of what matters happens in a barn-turned-workshop in the English countryside, where bolts of fabric, work tables, and shears function both as tools and, arguably, as ritual instruments. To define our terms clearly, psychological drama, a genre that foregrounds interior states, affect, and cognition over external spectacle, even when spectacle is present. Supernatural motifs, narrative devices invoking forces that transcend empirical causality, here materialized as a red cloth specter that occupies or attempts to occupy human bodies. Two-hander, a work centered on the dynamic contestation and chemistry of two principal characters, such that secondary figures orbit but rarely displace the primary dyad. This taxonomy is not ornamental. It organizes our expectations and therefore our interpretation of the film's choices about intimacy, scale, and ambiguity.
So basically, we are watching a very famous person and the person who used to help shape her image. And the story keeps asking whether art is therapy, or a trap, or a ghost that will not leave. Yes.
Moving forward, why this matters now. The film turns celebrity culture into an X-ray of mental health, credit, and labor. In simpler terms, it asks who gets to own the story when the story is your body, your voice, and your brand. Its reception was sharply mixed. Critics praised lyrical ambiguity and performances, while others decried an affectation and smallness relative to pop spectacle. This tension between art and commerce is not theoretical. The box office was approximately $3 million against a reported $20 million budget, which is a sobering data point on the limits of hybrid forms in the current marketplace.
And it reminds us that even with big names, the audience may not follow if the film refuses easy categorization. That is useful for anyone planning a thesis and a budget at the same time.
On to our next point, the basic facts. The film is directed by David Lowery and stars Anne Hathaway and Michaela Cole. Hunter Schafer appears as Hilda and FKA Twigs as Imogen. The premise is disarmingly simple. With 3 days until a comeback performance, Mary reunites with Sam to design a dress. The garment becomes, if you will, a battlefield where love, credit, and resentment are cut and pinned into shape. Supernatural horror is not decoration. The red cloth specter invades Mary and later is extracted with sewing shears in a ritual that makes couture into liturgy.
Chronology helps. Lowery has pointed to Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 for operatic Gothic tone, and to Taylor Swift's Reputation Stadium Tour concert film for stage vocabulary. Production proceeded during the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike under an interim agreement due to independent financing by A24, Topic Studios, and IPR.VC. Principal photography wrapped by July 2024. The soundtrack plan surfaced in March 2026, with the lead single Burial released then, and the album Mother Mary Greatest Hits arriving in April 2026. The film began limited release in April 2026, before a wider US expansion later that month.
Musically, Daniel Hart provides the score. Original songs involve Jack Antonoff and Charlie XCX, with an additional original by FKA Twigs. And crucially, Hathaway performs all 7 soundtrack tracks herself. Reviews ranged from IndieWire's A and the Times 4 out of 5 to critical pans from The New Yorker, Time, and Variety, with intermediate positions such as 3 out of 4 at RogerEbert.com and 2 out of 5 at The Telegraph. These gradients matter. They map audience pathways for a film that stages a séance over intellectual property, love, and pain, then asks us to call it a pop show. Before we get to the complexities, a brief personal note. The film's preoccupation with authorship and shared credit mirrors academic life. Many of us have, metaphorically, performed exorcisms with red pens and style guides, attempting to pull resentments out of a draft so that a collaboration can breathe again. The difference here is only of tools: shears in a barn, track changes in a lab. The stakes, to some extent, feel similar. Let's proceed to the next point. 3 big questions to organize our inquiry. First, historically, what inspired the film's stylistic and narrative approach? Second, counterfactually, what if a major mainstream pop star, say Taylor Swift or Beyoncé, had contributed music or appeared? Third, contemporaneously, how does the film challenge traditional pop star narratives, and where might that lead future research and storytelling?
Professor, what were the key inspirations that shaped the film's style?
It is crucial to understand the dual lineage. From Dracula, Lowry borrows an unabashedly operatic Gothic palette, saturated reds, theatrical blocking, and symbols that announce themselves rather than hide. Textiles do double duty: veils, capes, and in this case a red cloth ghost, as both image and meaning. From Taylor Swift's Reputation Stadium tour, he acquires a grammar of scale: LED architecture, choreography, the geometry of a star occupying a vast stage with calculated stillness. These 2 lineages collide with the workshop's aesthetic minimalism. We oscillate between chamber drama and arena spectacle. Hathaway's performance approach, informed by Beyoncé's Homecoming, and specifically the phrasing discipline she has cited from American Requiem, tightens the character's exterior control while admitting hairline fractures of doubt. The music, with Antonoff and Charlie XCX contributing originals, and Daniel Hart's score threading Gothic tonality through synth textures, completes the bifocal vision: catchy hooks above, subterranean dread below.
Professor Alexei, could you clarify how these inspirations affected the film's reception?
Certainly. When a movie advertises stadium-scale iconography but situates most of its drama at a workbench, expectations become a contested variable. Reviewers attuned to lyric ambiguity and performance detail rewarded the gamble. Others perceived a mismatch between promise and delivery, calling attention to modest production scope relative to the subject's global fame. This divergence is not merely taste. It arises from the film's intentional friction between spectacle and intimacy. We observe the same split in the marketplace. The form invites close reading rather than repeat crowd attendance, which in commercial terms is a costly virtue.
Professor, if a major pop star, say Taylor Swift or Beyoncé, had contributed music or appeared, would that have changed the film's trajectory?
A reasonable counterfactual. In marketing terms, such a cosign would likely have reframed the film from an art house experiment to a pop culture event, expanding first-week awareness and possibly widening critical hospitality. critics often recalibrate when a work becomes a moment. Soundtrack streams might have functioned as a parallel on-ramp to ticket sales. However, there is a delicate trade-off. The diegesis depends on Mary reading as a composite, a speculative future megastar, rather than a stand-in for any single person. An overt contribution from Swift or Beyoncé could compress that ambiguity, anchoring interpretation to a real-world persona, and inviting brand discourse to displace character discourse. We might have gained box office and lost indeterminacy, and with it some of the film's argument about authorship.
Professor Alexei, would such contributions shift the film's thematic focus?
To some extent, yes. The central theme here is negotiated authorship between Mary and Sam, resolved through an exorcism that is also a co-design session. If a dominant real-world star authored or performed the definitive track, the gravitational center might slide from the fictional partnership toward a meta-text about a superstar blessing another superstar. The red cloth could start to read less like a personal trauma being repurposed and more like a brand shedding its snake skin. The ritual would risk becoming a marketing allegory rather than a phenomenology of guilt. In simpler terms, bigger music might make a smaller movie, thematically speaking.
Professor, how does Mother Mary challenge traditional pop star narrative?
Traditionally, we have the rise-fall redemption arc, the montage of tour buses and managers and headlines, the closing catharsis on stage. Lowry inverts this. He confines the moral action to a workshop. He literalizes trauma as a red fabric found within the body, and he withholds climax by reporting the final performance off-screen through Hilda. The diegetic dispute over whether Mary's onstage injury was a suicide attempt remains unresolved. The film resists policing interpretation, which, academically, is a credible way to foreground agency. Moreover, the dress is not costume but argument. When Sam proposes a train made of Mary's past iconic dresses to be torn away, we are given a material calculus of persona shedding. The exorcism, Mary cutting her chest with Sam's shears, Sam extracting the specter, then transforming it into a dress, recasts creative labor as sacramental labor. In a field crowded with biopic conventionality, this is a deliberate deviation.
Professor Alexei, where does this leave room for future research or storytelling?
Several avenues suggest themselves. First, the political economy of credit in pop production, especially in designer-performer dyads, merits ethnographic and legal study. Who is named, who is thanked, who is erased. Second, the film's seance with Imogen, a fan played by FKA Twigs, invites research into parasociality as a ritual technology, how audience devotion enters, and sometimes injures, the performer's body and narrative. Third, there is a gap in scholarship on artisanal tools as cinematic sacraments. Here, pins, thread, and shears are liturgical items. Finally, reception studies could map tolerance thresholds for metaphor in music cinema. At what point do viewers follow an exorcism as healing, rather than dismiss it as affectation? Each thread points toward a cinema that treats pop not as noise, but as a laboratory for the self. To summarize, Mother Mary is a psychological drama that uses supernatural motifs, the red cloth specter, the ritual with shears, to interrogate fame, authorship, and the costs of collaboration. We traced its inspirations from Dracula's operatic Gothic to the concert grammar of Reputation and the performance discipline Hathaway studied from Beyoncé. And we noted how those choices generated both admiration and resistance. We considered the counterfactual of mainstream star contributions and the likely trade-off between event status and thematic ambiguity. And we observed how the film subverts the standard pop narrative by making healing a co-authored craft rather than a solo encore. For further study, one might pair it with Vox Lux to triangulate how contemporary cinema scripts pop stardom and catastrophe. Thank you for listening. Keep exploring, keep questioning. And if your ghosts are made of fabric, remember that cutting on the bias can theoretically produce a cleaner drape.
Thank you, Professor.